Tamanna, 25 students are there. They join 5 or 6 people more. Sorry, guys, there are low attendance, so we start at 10. Dr. Abhishek, Devan sir has joined. Please meet in the course. Hi, Tamanna, hello. So I think almost 30 students are there, so you can start.
Okay, sir.
Sir, can we start now? Sir,
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
yes, sir, yes, sir. Sir, start
Yes,
for
sir.
the book.
Hi, it's fine for me. Has everyone joined?
Yes, sir, 31 students joined.
Okay. Are we expecting any more number of students?
Sir, I think they will join in between the lecture.
Okay. So it's up to you. I have no problem.
Okay,
If you want, I can wait for a couple of minutes.
okay, sir.
Otherwise, we
Then we are
can.
starting at 10 in 2 minutes, sir. In
Fine,
7:10.
fine, fine, fine.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks a lot.
Okay, okay.
Manna, please start it at sharp 7:10. Okay?
Okay, sir. So can I start?
Yes,
Yes, sure.
Tamanna.
Sure, sure.
Okay. Okay. So good morning, good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to lecture number 8 of GAIMS into AAPI National Research Methodology Course and Workshop 2025. I'm truly honored to be moderating today's session on ethical consideration and publications ethic, a topic that forms the very backbone of responsible and impactful research. This evening, we are joined by a distinguished expert in the field of public health, Dr. Debian Podder. I'm sorry, sir, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but he's a physician, scientist, and a committed academician whose contributions speak for themselves. Dr. Poder currently serves as Assistant Professor in the Department of Community Medicine at Raiganj Government Medical College and Hospital under the West Bengal University of Health Sciences. With deep expertise in epidemiology, preventive medicine, and monitoring and evaluation, he has actively supported India's national health programs at multiple levels. From being a state surveillance team member in the IBBS HRG survey under NACP to playing key roles in campaigns like MRVC, IDCF, and IPPI, his hands on involvement has consistently supported public health advancement. On the academic front, Dr. Poddard has published extensively with 11 index papers and 8 ongoing research projects. He contributes as associate editor of the Immune newsletter and reviews content for major international publishers such as BMJ, SAGE, Elsevier, and Walters Kluwer Health. He is also a strong force in medical education and mentoring, currently serving as Assistant Secretary of the IPHA West Bengal branch and an executive committee member of ISAAI. We are truly grateful to have him with us today to shed light on the ethical frameworks in Indian research, common pitfalls, and publication integrity. Dr. Potter, it's an absolute privilege to have you with us today. The stage is all yours now.
Hello everyone, good evening. I guess I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, I audible.
Okay, first of all, I would like to so before we start, I would like to thank the organizers, the Global Associations of Indian Medical Students and the American Associations of Physicians of Indian Origin for inviting me to be a part of this elaborate course and workshop. And and I would also like to thank Dr. Tamanna, for such an elaborate introductions of mine. So thank you so much. Thanks to the entire organizing team for having me. So shall I share my screen?
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay. So I'll be keeping my video off to save the bandwidth.
Okay,
I
sir.
guess that won't be a problem.
No, sir, that's all. Okay.
Okay, fine. Uh, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So again, I welcome you all. I guess this is lecture number 8.
Yes.
So in today's sessions, we'll be actually discussing about the ethical considerations which surrounds the research and the publication process. So as a doctor, first of all, what we should remember, the only thing that we must remember is that we shouldn't do any harm to the patient or the participants that we have. So with that, I begin the session. Just a moment. Just a moment. My screen is visible, right? I'm having some issues with the network.
No, sir, your
So,
screen is visible.
okay. Just a second. I should move this. So, in today's sessions, I will be the ethical consideration is a very broad thing, and it is a core of any research or any medical research. So, in only 2 to 3 hours session is not enough to have a detailed idea about the ethical considerations that we must take care of during the research and the publication process. I don't know why it's not changing.
স্যার আপনি প্রেজেন্টেশন মোড থেকে ওটা আসলে নরমাল মোডে করে দিন।
I don't know, it is why it change হচ্ছে না কেন? Just a moment.
as a change হচ্ছে স্যার।
No, it is not actually. Sometimes it's working and sometimes it's not working. I'm sorry for this issue. This technical issue. So as we the Albert Schweitzer, the Nobel laureate, also a polymath, he mentioned that the first step in the evolution of ethics is a sense of solidarity with the human beings. So we must be respectful to the others, and we must not do any harm to the fellow individuals. So that is the one of the basic principles that we have in ethics. Now, what are ethics? Ethics are the rules or the principles that govern the right conduct. What are this? These are the moral principles, what is good and bad, what is right and wrong, no, and it is based on the value system. But these ethical norms or the principles are not universal. Often it changes within the within certain section of the society. So principles of research ethics. There are three core principles of research ethics. First is the non-maleficence, then is the beneficence, then is the autonomy. And there is some other important aspect that involves the ethical principles of the participants, like the justice, the dignity of the participants, the privacy and confidentiality of the participants, and the data that we are obtaining from the participants. From researchers' point of view, there are certain things or the certain principles of research ethics that we must take care of as the medical or clinical researcher. First is the integrity. Second is the competency, how competent we are in collecting the data, in how competent we are throughout the research process, and the honesty with which we write our manuscript, we analyze our data. Those are the important things. So it is our collective responsibility as a researcher to publish the data which are authentic. Now, ethics are, as I have mentioned already, it is the researcher's responsibility to ensure the protection of dignity, safety, rights, and welfare of research participants. Secondly, it is the responsibility of the ethical committees, like institutional ethical committees. Most of the institutions and the medical institutes in India and abroad, they have their own institutional ethics committee. So it is the responsibility of the ethical committees of various institutes and its members to ensure the provisions to keep the research within the ethical framework and standards. And it is also the responsibility of the community also must be informed about the research. They have to be a part of the research also. They must be made aware of the possible outcomes, which may be positive or negative, and also it is our responsibility to give them a feedback about the result of the research, so that the the gap or the gap that we have identified in our research can be percolated. Now, talking about certain historical events which gave rise to the need of development of certain ethical code of conduct. So, historically, medical ethics can be traced to Hippocratic Oath. As we all know, we all doctors, we take Hippocratic Oath once we complete our graduation. So, the term medical ethics, it was first coined by Thomas Percival. So there are some unethical studies that led to the development of the codes on medical ethics. So there was a felt need at certain point of time, especially during the World War II, certain unethical inhuman studies were conducted, like the Nazi medical experiments. Thousands and thousands of experiments were conducted by the Nazis or by the Germans among the prisoners and the civilians, which were unethical, which were inhuman, and that led to the development of the codes on medical ethics. And there are certain other studies like Tuskegee syphilis study, which actually the Tuskegee syphilis study, it basically observed the effect of untreated syphilis in Negro men without their consent. So the consent was not taken in a toxic syphilis study. Then in Willowbrook study, what happened? There was a deliberate infection. Deliberately, the disabled children were observed after they were infected with certain potentially fatal agents. They were observed for development of hepatitis. So that was also carried out in a unethical way. Then there are many other studies also, and there are Jewish chronic disease hospital study, but the code on the medical ethics was developed, followed by the Nazi medical experiments that were carried out during and in the pre-World War II. In all these cases, no informed consent was obtained. Now, there are, as I mentioned, that multiple experiments were carried out. So, what happened? They were carried out in inhuman conditions. No consent was obtained. There was questionable research standards. So, all the Nazi experiments, they were carried out by the German physicians, which were often deadly, and it was thousands of prisoners. They underwent the experiments, and many died. And there was a questionable number of prisoners who have succumbed. Now, the key facts about the Nazi experiments: infamous research activities at concentration camps on the war prisoners. Around 20 Nazi researchers who were doctors, scientists, or the physician scientists. Inhuman studies on exposure to high altitude conducted in a low pressure chamber. Freezing experiments, malaria studies, syphilis studies, typhoid studies. They were all deliberately carried out by infecting the prisoners or the civilians. And there are multiple other testing were also performed. Exact number of death still remains a mystery. Followed when the Germany lost in the war, in the World War II, followed the World War II, the trial was carried out in Nuremberg, Germany, which is famously known as the Nuremberg trial. I'm coming to that in a minute. So the key facts of this Nazi experiments are that the German physicians and the scientists, they supported racial hygiene ideas. So they used to carry out genetic research because they felt that they were the superior most races among all. The experiments were centered around three topics, like the survival of military personnel, testing of drugs and treatments, and advancement of Nazi racial and ideological goals. After the war, only a few biomedical experts who helped to implement and to legitimize Nazi racial hygiene policies were even indicted or disciplined professionally. These are some of the pictures where the health research was conducted involving the prisoners and civilians. As you can see in this first left-hand side photo, an army doctor watches as the malaria-carrying mosquito bite the stomach of a prisoner in a hospital during World War II. So see how much unethical the doctor is, or the scientist. He is observing a inmate getting mosquito bites, a malaria infested mosquito biting the prisoner. And then the right hand side picture is showing the high altitude experiment. Then this picture image showing the child victims of Nazi experimentation shows incision where the axillary lymph nodes had been surgically removed after they were deliberately infected with tuberculosis. Can you imagine how inhuman the research was? All this research where the the innocent individuals were infected with potentially fatal microbes or the microorganisms. Now, this is the prisoner in a compression chamber losing his consciousness before dying during a medical experiment simulating the high altitudes in a concentration camp in Germany. So, all these unethical, inhuman experiments, they led to a growing anger among the community, among the research community post World War II. These are the two infamous Nazi physicians. The left-hand side with the glasses is Dr. Karl Klauberg, and the right-hand side Joseph Mengele. They carried out most of the experiments. Now, this is the during the war crimes trial in Nuremberg trial. famous as Nuremberg trial in Germany, which was carried out during 1945 to 1946. And there are multiple documentary you can see over the in YouTube or any other. There are certain documentary also available over the internet. You can go through that. So the war crimes trial in Nuremberg, Germany, where all these physician scientists were convicted after trial for 2 years. Following this trial, the Code of Medical Ethics, that is the Nuremberg Code, was first created in the aftermath of this trial to address the abuses committed by medical professionals during the Holocaust. So, officially, this was the first time when the Code of Medical Ethics came into being. So, the Nuremberg Code included the principle of informed consent and the required standard for research. See, what is research? Research is we are searching, we are searching repeatedly to find out the gaps, to address those gaps, and to make a and to fulfill the gaps so that we can make the life of individuals and the community a better one. So that is the purpose of any research we conduct as a clinician or a doctor. So it has to follow some certain standards. These are certain books you can give it a try, like the Nazi Medicine and the Nuremberg Trial by Wendling, and the Murderous Medicine by Naomi Baumschlag. There comes an important declaration of Helsinki in 1964. The World Medical Association has developed this declaration of Helsinki as a statement of ethical principle for medical research involving human subjects, including research on identifiable human material and data. That means containing genetic material, human material. So physician and care providers shall act in the patient's best interest. This is an excerpt from the Declaration of Helsinki. So in 1964, it was first the Declaration of Helsinki came into being, and followed by there has been certain amendment. Last in 2024 also, there has been some amendment. I am not going into the details of that. So as I have already discussed, there are three main principles. One is non-maleficence, that means do no harm. Second is beneficence, and third is justice. So, and lastly, among these are the four basic principles, the autonomy. So autonomy means respect for individual right. A participant can participate in the research or can withdraw on his or her interest. We cannot force an individual to take part in the research. Second of all, the principles of beneficence. All actions intended to benefit others, and the benefits are proportionate to the risks. Non-maleficence, my first slide I have mentioned, do no harm. This is the most important thing, that please do no harm. And justice is equal justice for all, irrespective of the caste, creed, or the society that participants is coming from. So autonomy is, as I mentioned, it is a right of an individual. The cornerstone of protecting autonomy is the informed consent process. So informed consent process means we are informing a participant or the research participants about the details of the research that we are going to conduct in his or her own language. So now coming to the beneficence, the researcher, we as a researcher or a physician scientist should act in the best interest of the patient. I always mention this is the most important principle, non-maleficence. That means we shouldn't do any harm. We should make sure that procedure does not harm the patient or others in the society. The harm can be in the form of physical harm, it can be in the form of psychological harm, it can be in the form of social harm, it can be in the form of financial losses or financial harm. So we have to carry our research in such a way that the participants are not harmed in any way. Now, coming to this last of the four basic principles is the principle of justice, where there should be an equitable selection of participants. Participants must not be fairly compelled in participating in research. We shouldn't force them, like the prisoners, the institutionalized children residing in the homes. Then potential public health benefit must outweigh the risk of participants. So we must be sure that the benefit is more than the risk of the participants. So why this principles mandates stringent scientific rigor? So first is the research question. So whenever we are carrying out any research, the ethical research mandates a stringent scientific rigor in terms of formulating the research question. The research question, whenever we are formulating, before doing the research, whenever we are formulating the research question, we have to find out whether it is ethically right or wrong. For an example, if we want to test a drug for malaria, for the treatment of malaria, and we are giving the antimalarial drug to a certain group and not giving the antimalarial drug to another group of malaria patients, then that is not appropriate. We are not allowing a group of individual to get the antimalarial drug, so that is not ethical. So whenever we are framing research question for different types of epidemiology that we have, like the cross-sectional studies, the cohort studies, the clinical trial, we must uh, have to be sure that the research question is appropriate and it is ethical. Secondly, the research design. As I have mentioned, the type of research question, based on the type of research question, our research design should be formulated. Like if we want to test a drug against a placebo, we have to formulate the research question in that way. If we want to assess a group of individual, suppose a group of children who was born on a certain date, like the birth cohort, we can go for a cohort study. If we want to assess a group of uh, mother, antenatal mother, we can do a cohort study. Likewise, we have to be very particular about the research methodology, because it helps the other researchers or the peers to have an idea about how we as researchers have conducted the study. So methodology is a very important part. Now coming to the informed consent. So methodology, there are multiple subsections in the methodology that can be discussed in some other day. Uh, Informed consent, which constitutes the document and the form. Informed consent document means the details of the research, why the participant or the individual has been approached for a certain research. So what are the benefits, what are the possible risks, what are the possible benefits, if any side effects occur during the research, how we as a researcher are going to address, whether there is any incentives for the study or not, so how the data will be analyzed, how the data will be stored. So everything are being covered under informed consent document. So the informed consent document has to be prepared in certain way where the participant can understand. So it has to be prepared in the local language which is understandable to the participant or the research participant. So based on that, the participant will be explained about the details of the research, followed by he or she has to sign the informed consent form. Now we have to balance between the risk and benefits. We must try to develop certain research question where the benefits outweighs the risks. Now in terms of data analysis, often we there are certain malpractice that we as a physician scientists often perform. Even we always try to get a p value less than 0.05. We always try to analyze in a certain way, or we try to mine the data in a certain way where we get a p-value of less than 0.05 to get a statistically significant value. But that should not be done. In terms of data analysis, any kind of, if a data is not statistically significant, doesn't mean that the data has got no value. So in terms of data analysis, it has to be taken care of that appropriate statistics and appropriate procedures are being maintained in during the data analysis part. And the publication process, after all this research, the formulation of the research question, preparing the research protocol, getting the informed consent, before getting the informed consent, applying, getting the IEC of the approval from the institute, and performing the and collecting the data, then analyzing the data, then preparing the final manuscript for the publication process, which is a very rigorous task. So this research is basically the basis of evidence-based medicine that we practice as a doctor of modern medicine. So if we actually practice evidence-based medicine. So if there is improper research, the evidence that will be generated from this research will hold no value. It will be, if the analysis is not proper, the quality of the result or the quality of the publication will automatically go down. So there is an evidence-based pyramid that we have, which I'm not going to discuss on because it will be taking more time. So evidence-based medicine is what we practice, and it changes every day. We, as a practitioner of modern medicine, we practice evidence-based medicine, where evidence are continuously being generated through research. So research is a continuous process where evidence are being generated. So, and based on the evidence, we treat our patients, we treat the communities, and we treat and we keep the different potentially fatal pathogens out of our sight and mind. So it is important that we follow all these steps in a proper way. Now, what is risk? So risk is a term, as I've mentioned, we have to balance between risk and benefit. So risk is a term which refers to the probability of a harm and its magnitude resulting from any activity related to participation in the research. And harm is the negative health consequences. But presence of risk does not always imply harm. Now, what is benefit? It is the favorable outcome of a research to the participant and to the community. It is the combined probability of, and the magnitude of several favorable outcomes of research. I guess, is it clear to everyone? If someone volunteer, or should I slow down?
So I guess the speed is fine.
Okay, thank you. Now, as I mentioned, that risks or the harm can be of several types. So whenever we are conducting any research, we have to take care of whether there is any physical risk involved in the research process, like risk of bodily harm or inconvenience. Suppose we want to we want to assess the hemoglobin level of individuals, where we have to collect the blood. So we have to be very sure that we are not harming the patient or the participants while collecting the blood. Now, there are psychological risks, or risk of emotional suffering. So whenever we are collecting some data which involves certain private questions, like questions on sexual health, question on partners health, so we have to be extra empathetic to ask something which carries some psychological risks. Then sociocultural risk of discrimination and stigmatization. Especially, there are certain vulnerable groups in our society. Those, as you all know, that there are some high-risk groups in our community who transmit several bloodborne diseases like HIV, hepatitis B, syphilis, and all. So there are multiple high-risk groups are there. So in those cases also, we have to ensure that they are not being discriminated. Then certain economic risks are there. So if a participant comes to us during the research, we have to take care that whether there is loss of wages or not. Lastly, the legal risks, the risk of violence on criminal prosecution. Suppose I am doing a certain trial which carries no value, or the drug that I am using in the trial as a physician scientist holds no value or is not approved. So the physician scientist can be prosecuted in that cases if these are not followed. Now there are certain categorization in terms of categorizing the anticipated risks that we have in research. Like first is the less than the minimal risk, where the probability of harm is nil or not expected. Like research on anonymous data samples, that like the data that are already available in the public domain. Like when you were doing certain reviews, it may be a literature review or a systematic review or meta-analysis, where the data is secondary, the secondary data analysis is being done, so there is no risk or less than the minimal risk. Second is minimal risk, where the probability of harm is not greater than ordinarily encountered during performance of routine tests, where occurrence of an adverse event is unlikely. Example is routine questioning, like history taking. All of you, we know how to take history. So it, why it is there is minimal risk? Because there is always the chance of psychological risk remains, chance of physical risk remains to somewhat extent. Then chest x-ray, exposure to x-ray, obtaining body fluids without invasive interventions, so they carry the minimal risk. Third is minor increase over minimal risk. So there is a minor increase over the minimal risk or the low risk, where what this means, increment in probability of harm or discomfort only more than the minimal risk threshold. Example, routine research on children and adolescents, research on person who is incapable of giving consent, like who are physically challenged, sorry, mentally challenged, or the victims of certain stress disorder or certain mental illness. So in that cases, it carries low risk. And drawing a sample of blood for testing. Now, more than minimal risk or high risk, where the probability of harm or discomfort anticipated in the research is invasive and greater than the minimal risk. Research involving any interventional study like clinical trial, we have field trial, we have community trial. Like you can remember, all of us are adults. So during COVID time, we all were vaccinated. Initially, a group of individuals were vaccinated, the health workers were vaccinated, the potentially vulnerables were vaccinated, followed by the entire community was vaccinated. So it was a trial, it was a community trial was carried out. So it involved high risk. So research involving any interventional study using a drug or any biomedical product or a device carries high risk. Like apart from that, there are invasive procedures such as lumbar puncture, lung or liver biopsy or endoscopic procedures. They all involves high risk. So risk are of 4 types, as I have mentioned: less than minimal risk, low risk, and high risk. So anticipated risk category, just to sum up: less than minimal, minimal, minor increase over minimal risk, that is the low risk, and high risk. So this is just the summarization of the risk categories that we can anticipate during our research. Now, as I was talking about the informed consent process, so process is not just signing a form. So informed consent process consists of informed consent document, ICD, and informed consent form, where the participant has to sign in presence of certain witness. So what is being done here? Here we have to inform why he or she is being approached to take part in the study. We have to explain the purpose of the research in his or her own language that the person understands. We have to describe the study design in a lay term. So basically, we have to explain them what we want to do, why the person was chosen for the said research. We have to explain the duration of the participation required. We have to discuss about any remuneration or incentives that whether that is present or not, or we have to discuss about the mechanism to inform the study result. We have to discuss the confidentiality arrangements and access to data. So how we are going to store the data, whether we are going to anonymize it, or we are going to de-identify the data, or we will be delinking the data. So we have to mention how we are storing the data, how we are analyzing the data, and how the after the data is analyzed, how we are going to what we are going to do with the data, or with the data the results from the analysis of the data. Lastly, confirm the ethical review has been obtained from the review approval has been obtained from the appropriate authority, that is the institutional ethical committee. Same thing, the process, we have to discuss the foreseeable risks. Along with that, we have to discuss the possible benefits to the individual and the community, whether the treatment, if it is a clinical trial or a community trial or a field trial, will the treatment will be available during and after the study of the completion, or in case of a normal study, if a in cohort study or the case control study or a cross sectional study, if someone suffers any kind of injury, and then how in what way the treatment will be made available to them. Discuss the alternatives to study medication or therapy, what arrangements have been made to deal with the research related injuries, and will the subject be compensated for research related injuries. So this has to be there in the informed consent document. So in certain cases, there is waiver of consent, like in retrospective studies. In studies involving lower than minimal risk, like as I have mentioned, the systematic review, the meta-analysis, where we are basically doing research with the secondary data, with the data which is already available in the public domain. So there, there is consent is not needed. Research on anonymized biological samples, certain types of public health studies or surveillance programs, like in case of India, we have an integrated disease surveillance program, IDSP. So, and there are multiple portal where we from where we can access the data of the individuals or the patients. Like we have a NVHCP portal, National Viral Hepatitis Control Program. There is a portal from where we can access data of patients from across the country. So research on data available in the public domain. Research during humanitarian emergencies and disasters where the participants may not be in a position to give consent, like that happened during the COVID time. During the COVID time, I guess all of you have observed that thousands and thousands of articles were published each and every day, because during emergencies there is a waiver of consent is automatically gets applied. In certain cases, reconsent or fresh consent has to be taken. So suppose if during conduction of the study or the research, if there is a change of benefit and risk ratio, then we have to take a fresh consent. So if there is a deviation from the initial protocol or the research protocol, initial deviation from the initial research protocol, we have to take a fresh consent. So participants who is unconscious regains consciousness, or who had suffered loss of insight regains mental competence, then we have to take in a fresh consent. A child becomes an adult during the course of the study, like in case of cohort study. Suppose we are following a group of children, and with time they have grown up. So when once they become an adolescent or an adult, we have to take consent as appropriate. Research requires a long-term follow-up. In that cases, we have to take a reconsent. Change in the treatment modality, procedures, site visit, data collection, possibility of disclosures of identity through data presentation or photographs. So in certain case report, so we have to take a fresh consent that I am publishing your photograph which carries your identity. in an upcoming publication. So that has to be, in that cases, a reconsent or a fresh consent has to be taken. Informed consent in research involving children. This is very important. So authority to allow a children's participation in research rests with parents or a legally acceptable authorized representative. So parental or the legally acceptable representative's permission for the children's participation in the research is termed as consent, whereas the child's agreement to participate is termed as assent. So agreement means the child is unable to sign, because if he or she signs also, it is not valid. The verbal agreement to participate is termed as an assent, whereas parental permission for the child's participation in the research is termed as a consent. Sensitive topics while safeguarding informations and data, and also if required for the regulatory clinical trials. Now for children less than 7 years of age, only parental consent is sufficient. So in case of children only, we take both the assent and the consent from the parent. But in case of children who is less than 7 years of age, only parental consent is sufficient. For children between 7 to 11 years of age, that means below 12 years of age, oral assent or oral agreement to participate from the children needs to be obtained along with counter signature of the parent or legally acceptable representative. Suppose the child has no parents, so the legally acceptable representative has to counter sign. For children between 12 to 18 years of age, written assent. It is not a verbal assent. It is not a verbal agreement. It is a written agreement from the children between 12 to 18 years of age has to be obtained in addition to parental consent or LAR consent. If a child becomes 12 years during the course of the study, the written assent must be obtained in addition to the parent or LAR consent. Especially the last point is for cohort study where the child becomes 12 years of age during the course of the study. Now, clinical trials of drugs and other interventions. So, the clinical trials must be conducted in accordance with the Indian GCP guidelines, Declaration of Helsinki, as I've already mentioned. So, Declaration of Helsinki, the clauses, it changes or it is amended frequently. And in case of India, there is a national ethical guidelines for biomedical and health research involving human participants, as laid down by the Indian Council of Medical Research, that is ICMR. Amendments to the Drug and Cosmetics Acts 1940 and rules 1945 and other applicable regulations and guidelines has to be followed. So if we are going to conduct clinical trials of drugs, we have to uh, perform that in accordance to the Indian Good Clinical Practice Guidelines, Declaration of Helsinki, National Ethical Guidelines as laid down by the ICMR, Drug and Cosmetics Acts and rules, and other applicable regulations and guidelines depending on the drug we are testing. Clinical trial interventions, it can be drug, it can be vaccines, any biomedical product. It may be a diagnostic agents, it may be a public health or socio-behavioral interventions, it can be a surgical technique. So interventions can be of various types. So if the clinical trial is within the regulatory ambit, all central drug standards and control organizations requirements should be followed. Fourth of all, if the students, an undergraduate or a postgraduate students are conducting clinical trials as a part of their thesis, basically the undergraduate student, there is no question of thesis. In case of post-graduation or postdoc, there as a part of thesis, if someone conducts the clinical trial, the guides and the institution should take the responsibility of sponsor. Ideally, the trial should not be sponsored by any other third party. It should be the responsibility of the institution and the guide to take the sponsorship. Now, clinical trials, lastly, is it must be prospectively registered with CTRI. that is Clinical Trial Register of India, which is mandatory. So these are the 5 essential things that we all must remember if we conduct clinical trials with biomedical equipments or interventions. Now research, so we have conducted the research, we have collected the data. Now coming to research misconduct, this is from the point of view of researchers. So there can be a fabrication, there can be a falsification, and there can be a plagiarism. So what is fabrication? Intentionally act of making up data. We have not gone, we have not went to collect the data, but we are sitting at the home, we are making up the data. In many cases where we as a teacher, we often find that students often they do make up the data, especially during the project, especially in the community medicine project. They often make up the data, they often do not go, but that shouldn't happen. We should not do any kind of fabrication, because that won't add any value to the research, or that won't add any value to the evidence base that we intend to. Second is the falsification, manipulation of the research material or the process, changing or suppressing the result. Suppose we are not uh, writing the result which we have found out without the scientific or statistical justification. As I mentioned, we always look for, acha, this is statistically significant, I should report this data only. Those which are not statistically significant, I will not report that. But that is not right. So we must not manipulate the research materials, we must not manipulate the data to always get a statistically significant result. The result may not be statistically significant, but the data, which is the biological plausibility of the data that we have, that is also important. Lastly, the plagiarism, which is the wrongful appropriation and stealing and publication of another research and another author's language, thoughts and ideas or expression. It can be in any form. It can be in the form of author's language or thoughts, his or her ideas or expressions, and representing them as their own original work, or duplicating one's own publication. Once I had reviewed a paper recently where an author, he has already published a data, a research in a journal which is although not indexed. Again, he has, after 3 to 5 years, he has again submit the same research into a index journal. So that is a kind of self plagiarism. So 3 years back he published the data, already he has published the data in a not index journal. 3 years after, recently he has again submitted the same research in a index journal. So this is an example of self plagiarism, which we should avoid, we shouldn't do at all. Now coming to publication ethics, so these first 3 are very important. In it also comes under research misconduct and publication ethics. Like we must avoid these 3 things: fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. And in case of publication ethics, as I have already told you, that we shouldn't be unethical, because the research that we are conducting, it basically adds to the evidence base, so that the health and well-being of the individual and the community is improved. So any deliberate and unethical problems arising in connection with the publication of scientific research should be avoided. Ethics education help us to understand the rules of professional behavior, to know our rights and to meet our responsibility. Ethical violations affect the quality and integrity of science and the evidence base, which is most important. So I always tell my all students that what we do as a researcher or as a physician scientist, we must add to the evidence base of medicine, because the evidence based medicine is the only thing that we practice, and that makes us different from other traditional medicine and other healthcare professionals. So we as a practitioners of modern medicines, we must follow the integrity, and we must try to generate quality evidence. So scientific publication is a team effort. So we as an author or a physician, scientist or a researcher, we have done a study, we have sent the study, we have analyzed the data, we have written a manuscript, we are sending that manuscript to a good journal or an index journal. The journal is again sending that manuscript to a reviewer for improving the quality of that particular manuscript, to improve the scientific rigor of that certain manuscript. So this scientific publication is a team effort. So we, if any of this member, be it the author, be it the journal, or be it the reviewer, if there is unethical practice from any of this three, then it is unethical. So ethical principles are applicable for whom? Any guess? Anyone? Ethical principles are applicable for whom? Is it applicable for the author or the journal or the reviewer? Anyone? Please volunteer. No one likes to volunteer.
So I would say the author.
Acha. Anyone? Any guesses from others? So ethical principles that we are already discussed, it applies to whom? She said from the author. Anyone else?
People are commenting. They're leaving in the chat. So we have two
Okay.
replies, one from Shriyashi
Hmm.
and one
Okay.
from Akansha. They also replied author.
Okay. Okay. Nice try. But ethical principles are applicable for all of us because it's a team effort. So it's important that we as an author, we practice in an ethical way. I as a reviewer, or Dattatreya is here also, he also reviews for many journal. So Dr. Dattatreya, I as a reviewer, we have to be ethical so that good quality evidence are being produced. We ethical means what is, we have to say what is right and wrong. As I mentioned in the first slide, what is good or bad, what is right and wrong. So it is our responsibility as a reviewer also to be, to act in an appropriate way. And lastly, the journal also. Suppose we are accepting manuscript which is a low quality evidence, which is a low quality evidence in lieu of certain cash or kinds. So that is not done. I have seen many articles in a good journal. I can give you the names also. Even in PLOS, I have seen many journal who is a very poor quality journal. We have discussed in the journal club also in our college. So there are many articles in PLOS, even in Wiley. They are big journals. They are big journal or the publishing companies. There are also certain low quality manuscripts are also getting published. I don't know why. I don't know how they are getting published in there, but it should be in an ethical way. A good quality evidence should get published so that that evidence can be used for the improvement of health and wellness of the individual and the community. So as I mentioned, so it is a team effort and it is the responsibility of all. So journal misconduct is often predatory open access publishing. Often they will start, you will be getting mails from various predatory open access publishing that they will be publishing your uh, manuscript in if you give them certain publication fees without providing them the editorial and publishing services associated with the legitimate journals. So they will publish your manuscript only in lieu of publication fees. They won't send the journal or the manuscript to certain reviewer. So they are violating the process of this reviewing the manuscript. So there are certain predatory open access publishing, which is a journal misconduct. They pretend to be legitimate, but they are not. Lastly, they do a poor or a fake peer review. They do not do a peer review in a proper way. So most of the journals which are not indexed in appropriate databases, they are carrying out this misconduct. So we have to avoid these journals. That is the first thing. See, we all are, you all are young researchers, you are all, I am a mid career researcher. So we will be researching in the days to come, but we have to avoid these journals because we are doing the research in a very hard way. Often we do not have funds. In spite of limited resources, we carry out the researches. We after all the clinics, after all our lecture classes, after all the practical classes, we put in efforts, we put in time to publish a good quality, to prepare a good quality manuscript. But if you publish that in a bad journal, then all your efforts will go to vain. So please, before you send your manuscript to a journal, check the authenticity of the journal, check the indexing of the journal. So that is very important, because it is it is a very, this entire research process, it has taken a toll on on you. So you have worked hard for it. So published in those journals which are authentic. So how to understand whether the quality of the journal is good or bad? So are we being misled? So often you will be getting mails from different publication houses that this is a very good journal, we have so much impact factors, this and that, and just publish. Will be just submit your paper. We will be publishing it in few days, but you have to submit certain article processing charges. There will be no peer review or a fake peer review, and we will be publishing our data. So how will we understand the quality of a journal? Suppose this is a journal, it's a very old journal, Indian Journal of Preventive and Social Medicine. uh, their article was published, prevalence of anemia among adolescent girls in rural area of a district in Maharashtra. So this is a study that has been published in this journal, but see, it is indexed in Index Medicus, INS, INSDOC, NCI current content database of alcohol and drug abuse. This has been obtained from the journal website. Database in TB and allied disease, IND made, entered in WHO CD-ROM for Southeast Asia. So this information has been obtained from the journal website only. Now see, indexed in Index Medicus, allied disease, INDMED. So do you think that this indexing is appropriate? Anyone? So we have to first find out whether we have to go to the journal website. We have to check the journal homepage. We have to check about the journal indexing and abstracting, whether the journal is indexed in certain databases or not. Databases are like, there are certain medical databases. For an example, there is DOAJ. You know what is DOAJ? Directory of Open Access Journals. So we have PubMed, Medline PubMed, we have Scopus, we have Embase. So these are databases where all the medical evidence are being stored. So if a journal is indexed in these databases, then only you considered. But see here, the indexing is in Index Medicus. Allied disease, IND-MED. I am not sure about whether they exist or not. So Index Medicus for Southeast Asia, it is not an indexing agency, first of all. So the journal is lying. So database of articles which are published in selected journals within the Southeast Asia. So it is not an indexing agency. So the journal has lied. Now the impact factors of journals, how much to rely? Often the journal will falsely claim about their impact factors, but we shouldn't rely on the impact factors only. So, what is impact factor? It was first invented by the Eugene Garfield. The use of journal impacts on in evaluating individual has its inherent dangers. In an ideal world, evaluators would read article and make personal judgments. So, never ever rely only on the impact factors of the journals. Check for the indexing of the journals and then send your manuscript. This is the journal impact factor, a formula. It is the number of times articles are published in last 2 years cited by the indexed journals divided by the total number of citable items in the last 2 years. So, impact factor is a measure reflecting the average number of citation to articles published in journals. There are other methods to assess the the journal quality, that is eigenfactor, H index and immediacy index. Now there are fake impact factors, as I have mentioned. Companies make up and sell impact factors to open access journal publishers. Many publish articles mistakenly, believe that their work is in a high impact journal. So I always tell my students and my peers, please, even my peers who are senior professors, they publish in journals which has got fake impact factors, which is unfortunate. We shouldn't publish our hard-earned our article in a bad journal, because if it gets published in a bad journal, then the entire effort that we have put in for that article will go in vain. So peer journals advertise their bogus impact factors in email and on their websites. So please be aware about them and avoid them. There are some examples you will be getting mails of Cosmos impact factor. These are all fake. Impact factor is not a direct measure of quality. It applies only at the journal level. It should not be extended to judge the influence of an individual article, researcher, or institution. But check whether the journal has an appropriate indexing or not. Is Google Scholar an indexing agency? Anyone? It is not an indexing agency. So we have to keep that in mind also. Indexing agency are the Medline PubMed, the Scopus, Embase, DOAJ, that is the Directory of Open Access Journal. Earlier, there was Index Copernicus, but which is not accepted nowadays in India because of its poor quality. It has been removed from the index base. So we have to be careful about these impact factors. Second part, as I have told, it is a team effort where the journal, the author, and the reviewer all are involved. If we do misconduct, then it affects the evidence or it affects the quality of the article that we are publishing. So now comes to the author misconduct. It can be in the form of fabrication, falsification, as I mentioned, or in the form of plagiarism. So misconduct consists of serious deviations from the widely accepted norms. So as I mentioned, it's honest error or scientific differences. Scientific differences do not constitute scientific misconduct. Falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism consist of scientific misconduct from author's point of view. There are certain terms which is quite catchy, like trimming, altering one's data, cooking up the data, selective reporting of one's data, forging up the data, that is making up of the data. This term was coined by Charles Babbage in 1830. See how old these terms are. Now these are some of the deadly sins that we as authors or the physician researchers we must avoid. First sin is carelessness, like citation bias, understatement, and negligence. Then second sin is redundant publication, same tables or literature review reported without noting the prior sources. Unfair ghost or gift authorship, failure to include eligible authors. Suppose I as a teacher, if I tell you, please, since I am a teacher, give me an authorship. But that is totally unfair, that is totally unethical. If someone demands authorship without any contribution, you as a researcher should not give that person authorship. This should be, you should make it a habit, because often in life, since you are growing, often in your profession, whenever will be going for the post graduation and postdoc, there also your friends or your peers or your seniors will tell you, give me a authorship, because it will add to their publication list. But make sure, if someone has not contributed substantially, do not give them the authorship. Fourth is undeclared conflict of interest. Suppose you are taking some cash or something from in cash or kinds from a pharmaceutical company, and you are for a clinical trial or a drug trial, and you are not citing that. So that becomes a undeclared conflict of interest, which we shouldn't do as a researcher or as an ethical researcher. Fifth is the human and animal subject violation, that comes under the basic principles of the ethics. Plagiarism, this is a deadly sin. And nowadays, in this AI and all, where there so many AI models are available, apart from chat gpt also, there are multiple AI models, where it is, where whatever what we are doing, we are just simply paraphrasing from one's article, we are then copy and pasting. That shouldn't be done. We shouldn't copy paste, we shouldn't directly copy paste or paraphrase it and copy it. We shouldn't reproduce others works or idea without significant contributions as one's own. So plagiarism is a very critical issue nowadays with the emerging AI models and all. So we have to be taken care of that. Other fraud includes fabrication or falsification, as I mentioned, misappropriation of others' ideas or plans given in confidence. I have even seen a data. I have forgot to incorporate a publication. There is a publication which has been published in Elsevier, in the most probably in vaccine, in the journal Vaccine from Elsevier. There, the author has directly copy and pasted from Chat GPT, and that has been printed in the manuscript in the article. So see how negligent we are as a researcher, as a peer reviewer, as a journal publication agency, that we are publishing publishing an article or a scientific article which is directly copied and pasted from Chat GPT. So these are fraud. So we should avoid this 7 deadly sins, because that this kind of, if this these are all there, then it is not going to be added in the evidence base. It has not, it has got no values. Now there are certain things like citation bias, understatement and negligence. So it can be requested, there is a request for correction can be made to the author, and later to the editor may be written. Redundant publication, same tables or literature review reported without noting the prior source. So what can be done? You report that to the journal, then there will be rejection of the manuscript and copyright infringement can be applied. Unfair authorship, failure to include eligible authors and honorary authors. These are examples. Now what can be done? The colleagues will become angry, then complain to editor or the employer. Rule of thumb, a co-author or a co-PI or the principal investigator should make direct and substantial contribution to the work, not necessarily to the writing. Co-authors should also share the responsibility for the scientific integrity of the paper. Make sure of that, because otherwise penalties may apply. Other fraud, as I mentioned, there can be retraction of the manuscript, notification of the employer, and publication ban, even for lifetime, can happen. Plagiarism, retraction of manuscript, and notification of the employer. So the word plagiarism, it comes from the Latin word plagiarius, which means kidnapper. So don't plagiarize, even yourself. As I mentioned, author has submitted the same manuscript which he has published few years back in an index journal. So that is, he is plagiarizing his own article. So that is not right also. So there, it has been published in a this don't plagiarize even yourself. This is a commentary. It has been published in Postgraduate Medicine in 1991. Now, last in the team is the reviewer. So we have mentioned all are involved: the journal, the author, and the reviewer. Now, reviewer misconduct. Those who wants to be reviewer in the future, or those who want to review in future, review various articles or the manuscripts in the future, they should avoid this misconduct. Promptly return the manuscript if you are not qualified to review it. Judge the quality objectively based on the reporting guidelines or the reporting standards. There are multiple reporting standards that you can get from the Equator network. Equator is EQUATOR, Equator network. There are multiple guidelines. For example, there is STROPE checklist for case control study, for cross-sectional study, for cohort study. So there is a STROPE checklist, there is a consort checklist. So there are multiple checklists are there, which are the standard checklist or the scientific, they are scientific reporting checklist, which we should follow because it is widely accepted, and there is a general convention that we must follow them while publishing our result or manuscript. So judge the quality objectively. So whenever you are reviewing a manuscript which has been sent to you by the journal, review that objectively based on certain scientific standards or scientific reporting checklists like STROPE, CONSORT, and others. Avoid potential conflict of interest. Suppose you have got a manuscript which you know that it has been conducted by someone whom you may know. So either decline to review that manuscript or fully disclose the conflict to the editor. So avoid potential conflict of interest. Lastly, as a reviewer, please do not review manuscript where you have a personal or a professional connection to the author. So that comes under misconduct. If you do, that is a misconduct. Fifth is treat manuscript as confidential. So whenever a manuscript comes to you, it is a confidential data. Don't turn the manuscript you just reviewed into a course handout, even if it is wonderfully relevant. Wait until it is published. Provide adequate evidence for your judgments, including citations. So whenever you review, whenever you are reviewing for certain journals or the manuscript, try to provide constructive feedback so that the quality of the manuscript can be improved. Know the literature, point out the missing citations, call the editor's attention to any substantial similarity between the manuscript and one that has already been published. If you find that uh, the manuscript that you have received has got certain similarities with some other articles which is already there in the public domain, then inform that to the editors. Lastly, turn in all reviews promptly. Please do not take time, because if you take time, someone's tenure case may hang on your decision. So it is better that you complete your review promptly. Then do not use the ideas or the results in a manuscript except with the permission of the author. You can abandon an approach the paper shows will be unsuccessful. So please do not use the ideas or the result without the permission of the author until the manuscript is published. So towards the moral compass, we have to be morally and ethically correct. So as a patient, for the patient and the participants, please do no harm. And remember the first slide that I have mentioned. Remember that the benefit should outweigh the risk of the participant. The scientific community, we as a scientific community, we should be transparent, we should be honest, we should be accurate, and we should carry out this research process in an integrate. We should maintain the integrity throughout this research process. Lastly, these are some of the national guidelines from ICMR. There are many. There is you can go, you can check the websites also. There are details of this ethical research consent process, different guidelines, what to do in what type of research. And this is from naitik.gov.in from Department of Health Research. So be ethical. That's the last thing. We should be ethical as a physician scientist, as a researcher, so that we can generate quality evidence, so that we can excel in our life as doctors also. Because based on the evidence that we generate as a researcher, we are going to benefit the society. Thank you so much. Any question? Please feel free to ask.
Um, Thank you,
Sir,
sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope
sir, can you please,
anyone has any
I
question.
just want I just
Yeah,
want to thank you so much for that insightful and very wonderful presentation. And now we'll move on to a short Q&A session.
fine.
Participants, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll take them up one by one.
sir, there is a question from the audience how we can find a suitable journal. uh,
Uh, Sorry, can you please repeat?
Sir, most of the audience has a question that what is the suitable, how to find a suitable journal
Yeah,
to publish a research. So how to find a journal from for the research.
okay. So, how to find a suitable journal? I have mentioned very briefly how to find a suitable journal. But first thing, whenever we have done a research, there are certain research questions that we have framed. Based on the research question, we have conducted our study. So, there has to be certain keywords. So be sure to select your keywords appropriately, because that helps in search engine optimization. If your keywords are not perfect, your chance of getting cited also become less. So it's important that your keywords are there in your journal. So based on the keywords, you can, as a early career researcher, you can directly go to the medical databases which are already there, commonly used, like the PubMed, okay, like the DOAJ. You can directly go to the medical databases that you have, and you look for where the similar articles have been published. Then you search. See, different journals has different criteria. So suppose certain journal matches your criteria, like you want to publish, you have done a research project on child's health. So in that case, you have to publish that in a journal which publish or which fulfills the aims and scope of your research. So whenever you want to publish based on the research question, you search the journals and you read the aims and scope of the journal. Every journal website, a good journal website, in the journal homepage, there will be, you will be having the aims and scope. That is important. Aims and scope of the journal means what kind of research the journal usually accept. So that is important. So first of all, we have to select a good journal which has a good indexing. Like minimum indexing that is acceptable in India is DOAJ. So we have to check whether, first of all, we have to check that the journal matches our research question. Suppose a journal on pediatrics will only publish certain manuscript which is done on the children. It will not accept manuscripts which are done, which are conducted, or the research which are conducted on the adults. So based on the research that we have conducted, we will be searching the journals in the medical databases first thing. Then we will be checking the the indexing and the abstracting. The indexing is, it should be indexed in a good indexing databases. Either it can be PubMed or Medline, it can be Scopus, it can be Embase, it can be DOAJ, and there are multiple other medical indexing databases. Then Thirdly, you look for the aims and scope of the journal. Suppose certain journal, they only accept the case report. Certain journal, they will only accept the qualitative uh, studies. Certain journal, they only accept the mixed method studies. So likewise, you have to, third point is, you have to check the aims and scope of the journal where you intend to publish your manuscript. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Amanna, is there any questions in the audience?
So there's no questions in the chat box.
Okay.
Do
Have
I
any
hope.
questions? They can drop the question in the chat box. Okay. We have a question from Sayam Bhattacharya. He's asking, so can you please recommend a plagiarism checking software?
Acha, okay. See, ideally the good ones, the good plagiarism softwares, they are paid actually. The paid versions, in the paid software, you can use Authenticate. It's a very good software, but that is a paid one. Most of the softwares which are good, which are rather not, I shouldn't say good, which are reliable, are the paid ones. So one of which is the Authenticate software, Authenticate, ITHEN ticket. So that is a good one. Apart from, the free versions are okay, but they are not good, because whenever we check for the plagiarism, we look for the similarity index. So similarity index is basically how similar our lines or phrases are with the available uh, what should I say, available phrases in the published articles. So basically, free journal, free softwares, they are not that reliable or not that good. So try for a paid version, or you can, if in certain institutes, there are paid versions of this plagiarism softwares are available in certain institutes also. So that's the thing. Try to write on your own and avoid using AI models while writing, or like, I now see many of you use the paraphrasing tools, so avoid that. That's that is not good. That is not good practice.
Okay.
Okay. I hope uh, my session has helped you, and you will be, all of you will be publishing in due course of time. So
Okay. So with that, I think we've come to end the sessions, today's session. So on behalf of Games, API, and all our attendees, I'd like to express our heartfelt gratitude that you shared your experience and you contributed the time and experience and expertise with everyone. And a big thank you to the audience and for their engagement, and your presence and questions added so much value. So do stay tuned for upcoming lectures, and also take care and keep joining. Okay, sir. Have
thank
a
you
good
so much.
evening.
Good night. Have great day
Thank you so
ahead.
much.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much for having me.